up inside your head, a conversation for ops leaders that want to make their organizations truly amazing. We meet brilliant guests that have been there, done that, build the habits. Today, we're meeting the brilliant Ashley Harris. Ashley is an experienced operations leader used to working in fast-growing and high-pressure companies. With a passion for helping businesses become more operationally efficient, he has a passion for solving things with technology and data. To solve complex problems and to scale up businesses, he has a focus on improving customer experience both internally and externally. Hello, Ashley. Welcome.
Hey, Michael. Thank you. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, I'm really excited about meeting you today. I've been looking through your experience again prior to this conversation. You have some interesting companies you've worked for, and you've taken on one of those at that very interesting moment a few years ago when the world ended. Like you were into a new job at that point. So we're going to delve into you, what you see in teams and businesses to make the world go round. Give us a little intro. Who are you? Tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so I've been in operations for over 10 years, probably through luck, I guess, more than anything. And I probably hearing this more and more from different ops people I speak to. I actually trained at university. I went and studied outdoor leadership. So I wanted to become an outdoor mountain guide. That was always the dream. And then decided very quickly that although it was a great hobby, wasn't going to pay the bills particularly well. And so was looking for a real job, and so ended up at, in ops purely by chance. And so then over the last 10 years or so, I've been working through different ops roles. And yeah, it's when I think about this in preparation for today, actually was thinking about, gosh, how did I actually end up in this? And a lot of it's through sort of chance and then luck and then some hard work to get to that point. But it's been an interesting time during that time. I never would have thought at university this is where I'd end up for sure. Nice. So yeah, different roles in different companies. I started in vehicle rental, that kind of moved then and joined Tesla way back when, before Tesla was a thing, various roles through Tesla, and then primarily now at a smaller to medium-sized business in distribution. So yeah, various roles in different ops formats.
Loads going on. And actually, we've got a very similar starting point. So where you started in outdoor education, I did my H&D in sport and recreation management.
Okay. Yep.
So very, very similar. Where did you study that?
So that was the University of Cumbria in the Lake District. So it's like the perfect place to do it. And again, that was purely by chance as well. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to go and do maths or something because I'd probably drop out. And then this was at the time when Facebook had all the adverts in banners down the side of the page. And my dad was on Facebook and had this advert. And it popped up, and he said, "Why don't you go and do that?" And I said, "Yeah, but it's not really a job, is it?" And he said, "No, but it's called outdoor leadership." He said, "So if you then went to a job and afterwards and said, I've done outdoor leadership, so if I can lead people in a life or death situation in the mountains, then I can do it in an office space that's air conditioned." Yeah. And I went, I'm not sure that's the right line. But actually, that's how I got my first job at Enterprise, was using that exact line. And so, yeah, it worked out in the end.
Yeah, if ever there was a degree, and you have to learn a process to keep people safe, and then people need to follow your do not die. Outdoor leadership is because we had a heavy overlap with that as well. So
right,
the skills you actually are very transferable from those outdoor leadership learning spaces into that workplace, and I think they are very much transferable skills that probably have served you very well. You've alluded it to a little bit. Can you give me a rundown of your job titles from where you were to where you are now? Because I love the squiggly path of ops people. So take me through those job titles that you had.
Yeah, so I started Enterprise Rent-A-Car as a graduate, and so they have an amazing graduate program which pretty much puts the business in your control. So I started off as a graduate and went for assistant manager. Then once I kind of finished there, I moved on to a company called Northgate, who do commercial vehicles, and was employed as an assistant manager, but then very quickly, 2 days later, moved into branch manager. And then from there, applied to join Tesla. I thought it was a logistics role. Turned out it was customer service. And so my title was a delivery experience specialist, essentially a customer service person helping you take delivery of your car. From there, I moved into the UK delivery manager role, so I was responsible for that UK team. From there, I then moved into Western Europe's delivery manager, so looking after the Netherlands and the Benelux region, as well as the UK. from there, it was a kind of a weird transition. I went into sort of an operational performance management role to help the sales directors manage their operations. And then finally at Tesla was then responsible for European logistics and operations for all of the European markets that Tesla has. Before then moving out of Tesla when my daughter was born to join a company called World Remit, where I was head of global operations. And then finally now at ClearView, where I'm director of operations. So yeah, a squiggly path for sure is probably the right way to describe it.
That Tesla stuff escalated quite quickly by the sounds of it. It sounds like you were changing every 6 months. You were up a level of responsibility or so.
Yeah, I generally believe some of that was due to right place, right time, but there's also a huge amount of graft and hard effort and work there as well. I was very fortunate. I joined way back when before Tesla was really a thing. When I told my friends, they thought I was working for a milk float company. And there was probably 10 people in the UK. And so as the company grew, obviously opportunities were available. And so just continuously working, the 90-hour weeks that people see advertised in the press, I think helped me to get into those positions and right place, right time to kind of move into that. And so, yeah, it was very frantic. It's a way to learn very quickly how to do operations or in any role in that business, but it's a way to learn very quickly what to do, what not to do, and to get a kind of a crash course in business, I guess, in a very short space of time.
Yeah, nice. Okay, I love it. So
adrenaline filled is how I describe it.
Yeah, I can imagine there was a lot of adrenaline and a lot of endorphin hits, like lots of quick win, like lots of firefighting, quick wins, problems to solve, move on to the next.
I think that's the draw. I definitely think that's the draw of it, or it was at least for me, is this constant sort of hit adrenaline of just one thing to the next. And I then notice it if I ever took a day off, I'd then be ill instantly the next day. And so, there's a conversation of whether that's a healthy culture or not. But if you're up for it, then for sure the adrenaline ride and those endorphins are immense, and you're just constantly working from challenge to challenge, problem to problem, just trying to find new ways to fix things and solve things on the fly very quickly with limited resource and budget. And so, it teaches you very quickly to think on your feet and think in that first principle mindset.
Cool. Okay, lots to delve into. We'll come back to some of that. So you've held the ops title several times. So what does being an ops leader mean to you?
So it's definitely changed for me over those years. I think for me, I see operations teams as as plate spinners in a circus, right? You're spinning multiple plates at multiple times, all at different speeds. And it's how do you keep those plates spinning at the right speed without falling off, and making sure that one plate's not neglected or prioritize more of it. It's just how do you maintain that equilibrium on those plates spinning, and then supporting the business to reach its goals. I see ops is kind of the glue in the middle of things for most businesses. And so it's how can an operations team support sales or engineering functions or other departments to be as efficient as possible to help the business reach its goals. And so for me, it's about how do we problem solve, how do we set up the teams to be as efficient as possible with the right tools and systems to help achieve that. But yeah, it's definitely changed over time for sure. I think before it was just about customer service and just getting stuff done, whereas now, as I see it, is this sort of like that, the foundations of a house within a business.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, do you think some of that has changed because technology has enabled that connectivity is now easier to achieve?
Yeah, I think technology has definitely played a part. I think the biggest sort of piece of that is definitely from when I started to now, ops is seen as a more pivotal role in organizations. And so, when I look at my LinkedIn feeds, there's more and more sort of fractional COOs appearing than that was never a thing before. And I think now businesses are perhaps seeing, at least in the kind of experiences I've had, that the value of operations and the value that an ops team can have, as opposed to just, I'll send it to the admin team. It's send it, let's get the operations team on board with this. And I think having a bigger sort of foot at the table, I think is definitely part of that, coupled with that technology element, I think is what's making that shift over the definitely last 3 to 4 years, I've seen that shift for sure.
Yeah, nice. Okay, cool. All right. So let's go a bit more like small, like lower level. Talk about you and what makes you tick. So you mentioned like something that about when you were like super on a Tesla, you were either on or ill by the sounds of it. You were on or so. What do you do at the moment? What's your routine at the moment to keep you fresh and like making sure you're turning up ready to go for work and actually when you get home as well? So how are you balancing that? What do you do?
Yeah, so this was a massive learning curve for me when I left Tesla, and looking back, it was really, really hard to achieve, because that is on 7 days a week. And so it took me a good 6 months to learn that there is a different way of doing things. And it's actually our MD at ClearView that's really helped me to understand that. And I can only do my best job if I'm in the best sort of mental or physical state myself. And so that for me has been a real transition over the last 5 to 6 years. And so kind of the non-negotiables for me now are that fitness and nutrition. And so I have personal sort of ambitions, trying to achieve or join sort of the ultra cycling world. And so I've got a race next year, which is 1,000 kilometers over 3 days. And so the training for that is keeps me sane, keeps me in the right frame of mind. And when I'm training, I don't think of anything. It's like I'm just in this bubble, and it just allows me to kind of get that stress out and then to go again. And then the harder one for me has been putting my phone down or switching that off. And I'm still not great, but it's making sure that when I'm actually at home, it's being present with my wife, with my daughter, to actually kind of get that grounding time. And so that's been the harder thing for me to change. But I think it's critical to have that time to switch off and to focus and spend time with family, because that gives me the boost again to go again. I'm looking at my screen here, and at the top I have this little phrase that kind of that says, "Be relentless, so Sophie, my daughter, can be limitless." And that's kind of my focus. Is like it draws me back to that every time. And so that's what's shifted that mentality, is having my daughter. And that's why I left Tesla. I'd probably still be there to this day. And so I decided when she was born that lifestyle wasn't going to be right. And so just made that change and said, I'm going to leave and do something else so I can be present. And that's definitely been kind of my focus going forward.
Yeah. And that's a real, like, I think it's a real prudent move, because you have to pick the organization that suits you in that moment. Because when you go into parenthood, you can't having a company that needs all your time puts you in.
Yeah.
Really does that values conflict piece, which then really does the damage. So
yeah. Well, I was going to say, it's like I saw the negative side of that, and so unfortunately, and the media expands this, but Tesla has that where people, there's divorces, people break up, don't see their kid, there's all of that stuff, there's burnouts, and I'm very, very fortunate that at ClearView, work-life balance is prioritized and is valued, and so if you get that wrong, the negative effect of that is enormous. But if you get it right, I believe teams are more focused, more driven, more motivated, and value that flexibility that a company can give them, for sure.
And ClearView is the best companies, is that right?
Yeah, and the great place to work. And so this is the second year that we've got the accreditation across our companies. Yeah, and that flexibility and work-life balance is a massive part of that, for sure.
Cool, awesome. Okay, and when it comes to the period of work, how do you organize yourself? How do you make sure you're focusing on the key things? What's your approach to the day?
So I live and breathe in a software called ClickUp, which some people may have heard of, and so they're kind of trying to become the one app that replaces everything. But for me, if it's not in ClickUp, it doesn't happen. And so that's kind of the baseline. That's also been a transition for me at ClearView as well. I get sometimes termed as the whack-a-mole. It's like task comes up, whack it, move on to the next thing. And the ClickUp's enabled me to kind of focus on making the most important thing the most important thing. And so one thing I've done consistently for the last 10 years or so is at the end of every day, have that sort of 30 minutes to say, okay, did I do everything I needed to do today? Have I worked on that most important thing? And then making a plan for tomorrow. And so each day is obviously different with meetings, but make sure I time block. And so I'm a real advocate of blocking in those times to make sure that, you're not just sort of floating between things. It's really clear, okay, today. And so, on the screen in front of me today is clearly what I'm working on today. And so it's meetings, and I've got a block for certain tasks. And I already know what I'm going to do on those tasks within that time frame to really make sure I'm as productive as possible. I'm someone that if I don't have a structure to it, I kind of drift, or I get drawn to emails, or I get drawn to something else, and I'll float onto different things. But if I stick to that rhythm and that routine of blocking out the time, knowing what I'm going to achieve in that time, whether it's an hour, hour and a half, I'm much, much more productive. And ClickUp massively helps me achieve all of that.
Yeah, I love a good board, whether it, like ClickUp, whatever it is. And interesting, if you're watching this, there is a ClickUp in my 5 Habits series. So if you go find,
there you go.
Yeah, there is a 5 Habits of ClickUp. So we've been there, got a great guest on that one. So that for me, like the bit that I think might be the key to all of that isn't the ClickUp, is the 30 minutes of actually pre-checking the things that are coming tomorrow to make sure when you sit down, actually it's half an hour of productivity rather than 15 minutes of, how's this going to work? And then 15 minutes of productivity. Actually, you've lined it up, ready to go, and you pop the can, get going.
Yeah, and so it probably takes a little bit of time to get into that flow. And so probably when I first started this, it probably took me longer, whereas now I'm in a really clear rhythm. And so whenever a new project comes, the first sort of, I don't know, depends on the size of the project, obviously, but let's say the first block of time is purely just thinking time. So it's writing everything down. Okay, what do I need to achieve? What's the end goal? Who are involved in that? And so I've got this sort of project plan that I then break down into sort of bite-sized chunks. And so by doing that work up front, I can then schedule that. And of course, those plans change as I learn different things and I move things around. But by doing that 30 minutes a day, it's like, okay, the most important thing for me to achieve tomorrow or for this week is the dashboard for sales. And so I know, okay, the first stage of the dashboard is get the feedback from sales. So I'll go and work on that tomorrow. And it's just having that broken down into sort of hour to hour and a half bite-sized chunks. And also it's that sense of achievement. So when I get to the end of the day, I can say, tick, did that. So I've progressed that thing. Haven't solved it, haven't completely finished it, but I've moved forward and I've made progress every single day on whatever those projects are that I'm working on. And that sort of sense of, tick, 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 tick. Some days it's not as good as that. And so I have to reassess, understand, what happened, why didn't, what went wrong. And, sometimes the world blows up and you've got to reassess things. There's a problem with a customer that you need to get involved in or whatever the case may be. But the closer I stick to it and there's time for buffer in there and things, the more productive I am on a daily basis.
Nice. Yeah. And there is that cumulative nature of those small successes rather than an omni project where you don't actually really see anything happen. So knowing that you will have something tangible in your hand or in your digital pocket, actually, that is the thing that will move you forward.
Yeah, it's that kind of constant momentum moving forward. And I think, sometimes you get that wrong, but it's I try to apply this in day-to-day stuff as well outside of my own personal productivity. It's like do something, make something, try it, test it. If it works, great. If it doesn't, change it, fix it, learn and move forward. And it's just that constant reiteration of things. And that's definitely come from the Tesla world of just that reiterating of pieces. Those project plans therefore could change daily sometimes, but it's just taking that 30-minute pause and breath of closing down the emails, closing down Teams or whatever, Slack, all of those bits, shut them down and just focus for half an hour. For me, pays dividends in the following days.
Love it. Okay. Apart from ClickUp, what's the go-to productivity app that keeps your day ticking over?
That's a hard one. ClickUp is it's everything. I'm a huge ClickUp advocate for sure. It's my note-taking app, I say, is the other one. And so I'm a fan of a digital note app. And so I've got an iPad and there's an app called Nebu. And the way that it enables you to organize things, convert your handwriting to text, to then be able to export that and then feed it into ClickUp ultimately. but that ability to add tags and search for things easy to come back to, it's kind of saved me so many times of going back and going, oh, what was discussed in that meeting? And as long as I've captured that note, it makes my life so much easier to find those things rather than flicking constantly through a notepad, or was it in last month's notepad or this month, everything. And so my iPad follows me everywhere because it's kind of that home of all of those notes for sure. So yeah, that's probably my second, I'd say.
Nice. Okay, cool. And what habit are you thinking about creating? What's the thing that you need next?
For me, I think it's going to be that strategic, building myself in time to think strategically within a company. And so very much find you get stuck into the day-to-day, right? And so you have your projects, you have your things, but it's sometimes what I see for me and I've seen with people I talk to is that they get so stuck into that sometimes they forget that bigger picture. And so it's making sure that I find a way to create time and space to step back and think about those strategic things and think, okay, is this project still where I need to head? Where am I heading afterwards? What does the company need to achieve next? And it's that sort of, stepping back and opening up the thinking rather than just being focused constantly on the day-to-day and building time in to do that on a weekly or monthly basis. That I think is a bigger part that I need to focus on from a productivity point of view, because I think that will enable me to make sure that the stuff that I'm then putting into ClickUp or then prioritizing for the day becomes even more efficient on top of that.
I love it. And that's the other end to the whack-a-mole, right? Isn't it? You've got whack-a-mole,
yeah.
And then you've got the whatever the alternative to that, but like that planning, what am I going to need in 6, 12, 18 months in the business? Because if you're not doing that thinking now, you're going to have those problems further down the line.
Yeah, and ClearView's massively helped with it. Tesla's a very much whack-a-mole kind of business because the kind of strategic thinking is taken more or less elsewhere. There was an element of that, but it was done in head office. Whereas ClearView's enabled me to kind of step back and I've been encouraged more to become less whack-a-mole. Obviously, there's a time and need for that when there's quick things that have to be done, but it's making sure that you find the balance between what the scenario or the situation needs and having, as a company, ClearView uses their EOS entrepreneurial operating system model to run the business, and is the integrator of that in that sort of function. It's making sure that where we want to achieve in our 1 year, 3 year, and 5 years goals is then breaking that down to an operational level. Say, okay, what does the operations department need to do? What does that look like? So that we start the foundations of some of those things that want to be done in a year. We start them today. And I know my role in that, and they start the ball rolling on each of those things rather than just waiting and then going, oh, okay, now I've got to do this thing. What do I need to do with it? It's pre-planning some of that, which I've not necessarily done in the past.
Cool, absolutely. Love a bit of the EOS as well.
Another plate to spin in the background.
Another plate to spin. Yeah, but that was actually one of the books that got me to start to change my thinking about how ops was. I was very much a whack-a-mole ops person, and then I was told to read the book. I read it and I was like, see it.
There's more to this.
There's more to this. And it is about putting in the systems, but also getting other people on board. So what's the habit you're trying to retire? What's the thing that is stopping you progressing?
So one habit I'm still trying to shift is inbox zero.
Okay.
And I know there's pros and cons to inbox zero. I think when I was at Tesla, I'd get 500 to 600 emails a day. And so there was this real need of and again, it's like the whack-a-mole thing of like email comes in, whack it, get it done, and then file it, because when you got 500 to 600, you couldn't see the wood from the trees because very quickly your inbox is just full. And so sometimes my colleagues would open their inbox and they have something like 25,000 unread emails in the inbox. My mind would just like melt. I'm like, I can't focus in this. Now I've kind of stepped back. I think it's taken me more time to maintain and keep that than perhaps I'm getting benefit from it. I used to put everything into folders, and so when it's fitted, it had an individual folder for every single thing. And what I've tried to do more recently is just have a completed folder and then move it to just one folder rather than a folder for this person or a folder for this person or a folder for this person. But that habit's pretty challenging to break out of, because moving in emails to loads of different folders every time is really time consuming. but also that inbox zero of it kind of is driving my agenda. It's driving my focus as opposed to more important things. And so if I reply to an email today or tomorrow, it isn't probably going to fundamentally break anything or frustrate anyone or change the world. And so it's just realizing that the inbox is not the driver of me. I'm the driver, and the inbox is a part of that. And so whether I schedule in, 30-minute sections a couple of times a day just to do emails, that's something I need to readjust for sure.
Nice. Yeah. And that living by your email is you're living to other people's priorities at that point.
Yeah.
The email that's at the top of your inbox is not your priority. It's just the email at the top of your inbox.
That happens to be the last one. Yeah, the first one. And the tester part of me in the back of my mind right now is like punching the other side of me in my mind. And there's like this internal conflict. I can feel it, but I'm seeing it more and more that I'm just reacting to the first one, or to the person that perhaps is the sort of more senior or more important person within sort of our business community as such, whether that's a supplier or something. When actually it's I need to drive that as the person responsible for my day-to-day and my own priorities, rather than that being driven by it. So I need to break that and change the way I think there's still time and place for clearing some of that, but it shouldn't be the primary focus of things for sure.
Cool. Yeah, absolutely. And John, I'm going to be really good and not go down. I think we could quite go down that rabbit hole quite deep.
Yeah, there's a lot in there.
There is a lot in there. So stepping back a bit. So if that's you, what do you like? And actually, I'm intrigued from your current role and the tester role as well about the habits, the team habits, and what you see, because there are habits that make you productive that don't serve you like in longevity. So some of the Tesla you've mentioned is everyone's just going and it's bosh. Yeah. Actually, what habits do you see in successful teams that are worth keeping because they actually contribute to a good environment for the people in the organization as well?
Yeah, so this is a one where, again, I think it changes, and my viewpoint changes sometimes monthly on this. And I think the one thing that I keep coming back to is cohesion towards a North Star. And so making sure that everything we're doing is focused on the sort of the end goal in mind. And so to the test of time, that worked in some sense because, everyone's whacking loads of moles, I'm going to keep using that phrase, whacking loads of moles all across the business. But ultimately, everybody knew their purpose and their role within the company to get Tesla to its ultimate goal. But in the same sense, because they weren't understanding what that goal meant and breaking that down, the goal was to transition the world to sustainable energy. But it didn't then transition down into the next sort of sub-layer of, okay, but what does that actually mean for operations? And so people were whacking moles thinking, I'm getting there, but it's like, okay, but is that the most effective way to do it? Or is that the right way to do it? Or is it the most important thing to do now to reach that goal? And I see that, here at ClearView now is we have a goal in mind, and it's making sure that when we do our strategic planning and then we break that down to the operational team and in the conversations that we have, it's like, okay, but is that helping us achieve our goal? Is that the most important thing? And keeping us in the habit of checking in on that and holding ourselves to account on that. And for sure, as an ops team, we're not great at that all the time, but it's just making sure we're continuously holding each other to account to reach that end goal and keeping that in mind. That I think is the biggest one that ultimately then drives the right actions on the outside of that.
Yeah, because I think the conflict comes when you have teams pulling in different directions where they've got a local goal that serves them, but doesn't either serve the wider community or puts two teams into conflict. That is where that friction comes.
Yeah, and even recently we talked about this internally of the kind of war room, whether that's the right phrase or not for it, but it's this constant sort of, is everybody focused on the same thing, and how do we make sure that everybody is pulling together as opposed to in the individual silos? And that's where I think EOS does an amazing job, because it syncs everybody together onto the common plan, and heading in towards their part and what role they play in achieving the same ultimate goal at the end. And teams, or I've seen it, different teams at Tesla where that it's like, okay, well, these guys are doing a great job and they're working on the right things, but these guys are doing a great job over here, but the two things are not lapping together, and therefore they're just conflicting and causing more problems, and then actually you're getting further and further away from the goal. And so, yeah, that's definitely a habit we're trying to build. I think the second part then is communication. It's how do you get everybody to communicate issues quickly and promptly, and get everybody on that same sync, and those two sort of, that kind of North Star and the communication then link quite closely in together.
Okay, so if that's the aim, what are you seeing from the business leaders that make that happen? So what are the behaviors you see in those people leading that?
So for me, it's then that communication piece. It's then in, whether that's a weekly, in the US terms, you have the level 10 meetings for each of the departments, but also as a leadership team of then referring back to that. And so having that as a slide in the deck, or however you do the meeting, is coming back to that and saying, okay, but is that related to this? Where does it slot into those goals that we've talked about and agreed? And then the leader of that function going away and then having that strategic time that I talked about to say, okay, how do I now distill that message down to my team to say, okay, we have got to play a part in project X or in goal Y, and here's how that breaks down on, and getting their buy-in and input into that and say, okay, how do you think we can do that? And then whether that's through KPIs or OKRs or different ways of methodologies to do that, but it's ensuring that the leader is then distilling that, getting the team involved. And I love the word galvanizing. It's kind of one of my strengths in the widget personality sort of metric of galvanizing the team together. Say, okay, here's where we're going as a team. Here's where we're going as a company. Let's keep driving towards that and keep referring back to those things, and then coming back as a leadership team to kind of update people and realign back into that goal, and challenging each other where you've perhaps missed it or people have wandered off track slightly sometimes. And that's not easy, the challenge part.
Yeah, because there's the constant communication, but there also needs to be the telling the people they're not in the right place, and that can be hard.
Yeah.
Saying you're producing lots, but it's not what we need, and it's not what we need. So
Yeah.
how do you go about making the environment to have those conversations? So is there anything in particular that stands out in your mind to how you create that space?
Yeah, so this is one thing that's been quite a journey, I think, over time. At Tesla, it's actually really simple, because if you didn't do that, things would fail, or someone more senior would pick up very quickly, and it was like pushed down very fast. I guess what I'm seeing at ClearView and other sort of smaller companies I talk to is that it's very hard, because the people you work with, especially smaller companies, is that you have much closer relationships with those people, and they're almost friends at some point. And so you don't want to frustrate them. You don't want to accuse them of doing something wrong, or you can see how hard they're working. And so you feel like if you challenge them, they're going to be like, gosh, like, give me a break. You know how hard I'm working. I'm trying to solve it. And we've done a few exercises over the years to kind of break that down and to sort of open up the challenge. And so the simple start, stop, continue exercise. And so each person's given a bit of paper, you have to write start, stop, continue, and then you pass it around the circle, and you have to write for that person, one thing in start, stop, and continue in each, and then keep passing it around the table until you get your bit of paper back. And it kind of just opened up that conversation, because it was written down. You felt like you weren't sort of saying it direct to the person. And then by the time it got around, then you had to read it, and then people could then share that feedback. And then it opened up the conversation to say it to the person's face, and to kind of then explore those things more. And that, I think, was quite a pivotal tool that was used to really kind of open up our communication, and that it's okay to challenge each other. And when we challenge, we're not doing it in a personal way. We're doing it because we want to help that person, or we want to help the business get to where it needs to be. And then Radical Candor, the book Radical Candor, is another one that we've used a lot, of just being candid with that person and saying, look, I understand everything that's going on. However, in order to get the company to where we need to, or to solve this big fundamental problem, this is what we need from you. And so that exercise and then bringing Radical Candor in is definitely some techniques that we've seen really help at the business, for sure.
Yeah, no, and I came, like, Radical Candor is something that I talk about quite often with people, and it's one of the questions that quite often stumps people when they're coaching and they say, "Oh, I just can't connect with someone, or they're not doing it." I go, "What's your model for feedback?" And they go, "Model for feedback," and they don't. But once you, like in my world, once I understood that everything can have a structure, give feedback is a structure. Like what, like every and when you explain it, you're like, yeah, you just need to give them what you've seen, the effect of it, and the change you want. And then they're like, "Oh, I get it," and then it allows them to unpick it and then move on. And if you've got a whole business that effectively are agreeing, this is how we communicate and this is how we feedback, it's not a surprise. Actually, that's when you start
things move faster.
Yeah,
for sure. And I think it took a lot of work as a leadership team, but then bringing that down so that within a sort of an operational team where their peers and working, that was even harder to get people to say it's okay to say so and so has not done a certain thing with a customer order. That part we found challenging. There's still some way to go with that. And to your point on structure, I joined a session once about the VITAL coaching method. And so very quickly, the V stands for ask questions, I for then ask questions to inspire the right outcomes. T is then ask questions to tackle gaps, I think. A is then agree some actions. And I'm going to forget the L. I'll review the learnings of stuff. And so in that, it's that coaching conversation that you try to do with teams to give them the feedback as opposed to just bang, give them some feedback and walk away again. It's like coaching them through, okay, talk to me about this thing that went wrong or this thing that, that hasn't happened. Why? Yeah. Tell me more about it. And just working through that, that's massively helped me feel more comfortable in giving feedback. I think the tested world was very much about just tell that person they've messed up and then walk away. And so therefore you're like fearful of that now. And so the coaching methodology really helped me to kind of frame that in a more productive and helpful way.
And that's about expanding the toolkit, right? So actually you've got Rapid Hand, you've got the VITAL, because one tool does not fix everything. And this is why actually that personal growth, those continual programs around, right, our employee feedback says that we are not very good at developing people, and you quite often find if companies aren't good at developing people, they're not giving the feedback because people aren't being challenged, and people want the challenge, and they want to be pushed, and they want to know where they can be better. But quite often, the first thing you try to do to look after your people when you're a new manager is not tell them they're rubbish. And it's actually
because you're fearful you're going to upset them or you're going to push them away. But actually, people want to know where they've done a good job or not. I feel like the majority, people that are motivated and want to be there and want to do a good job want to therefore know when they've done something that could have been different or better. And again, it's that personal part. It's not about the person. You're not saying the person is wrong. You're saying that the way they could have done something could be improved or that it led to a negative outcome, and just being open about that. And one thing I've tried to do more with the team I have now is ask for feedback more often to me, in a hope that then opens up the conversation, that when I then need to give some feedback, that it's then seen as this is a two-way street thing. It's not just me constantly giving feedback. They can also do the same for me. And sometimes I've not liked the feedback, and I've had to adjust the way I take feedback on board, and not sort of being defensive to it straight away. And so that's what I've had to work on a lot. And I think eventually over time, and it does take time, I think, and just constantly keep checking in and piece by piece, and eventually it gets to a nice, healthy environment.
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it, when you hear something
you're not easy. Yeah, especially in an area where you thought you were doing a good job, and then all of a sudden, bam, it hits you not. Oh, actually, I joined one of our EOS integrator implementer showed us this beach ball, and so he held up a beach ball, and he said, "Ash, what color can you see?" And I was like, it had like different strips of color, and I said, "Red." He said to my colleague, "What can you see?" "Blue." And he's like, "You, yellow, red." And went round, and it's like you've all got a different perspective of the same thing, but ultimately it's still a beach ball. And I went, yeah. And something so simple as that. And so I've still got a little inflatable beach ball somewhere to remind me of it. It's like this still of like, okay, I think I might be good at it, or I might see that this is a strong area for me, but actually someone else from the other side of that beach ball may have a different scenario or a different sort of thought process on that. And so getting that feedback is critical to that.
Yeah. And it is being open for the feedback. It's also that person's feedback is the person's feedback. What you do and is up to you. And that is where the deep work starts, I feel.
Yeah, and then relaying back right into then, I've learned there's definitely occasions where I've kind of reacted negatively to feedback and therefore just very defensive up front and shut down, and then people are like, that perhaps wasn't the best response, and so I'm playing it through in my head now of at different times I've done that, and trying now to say, okay, I heard you, let me go away and think about it, taking that pause, whether that's a day, a week, or whatever, to think about it, and then making sure I go back to that person and say, hey, do you know what? I listened to it. I agree, or actually, I don't quite agree, and here's the reason why. Can we discuss that further? That's something I've tried to do a little bit more often, but yeah, definitely taking a pause is critical sometimes.
Yeah, cool. Okay, we're almost like through the meaty bit of the conversation.
Goes quickly.
Quickly. What do you see the sort of at that top level? Because look, we've sort of gone from you to the team to the top level of the business and where you're like thinking strategically. What are you thinking about sort of habit wise for your people, your department? What do you think the future holds?
For me, the shift of like literally, the last few days I'm thinking about the next financial year and what we do and where we head to. And I think the focus really becomes around a couple of elements. And as a team, it's getting us to focus on how do we scale quicker in a more efficient and automated way. And therefore, how do we get the teams to raise things quicker? And so I think that's something that perhaps as a habit the teams have got into of they know a problem and so they'll solve the problem. But that problem happens 3, 4, 5 or multiple times every single week, but they just are in the loop of just, I know there's an issue there, so I'll just fix it manually and move around. And it's how do we raise issues quicker, solve them faster, and make traction every single day on those issues. So that the teams are not getting caught in loops of just solving the same problems over and over again. And then how do we get them to, as an organization across the business, all the different teams have focus on getting their ideas out of their heads into action, because they've all got incredible ideas, and it's how do we get those to reach the surface quicker to then help drive the business strategy or the business vision on a year, 1 year, 3 year, 5 year basis, because it's the teams that are seeing things much quicker and understand the business probably in more detail than most of the senior team do. And so it's how do we get that to surface much more quicker through different meetings or one-to-ones or different mechanisms with that. And so that's a real focus for me for next year, is how do we get the teams to do that and then drive that challenge to each other of solving those problems on a weekly basis together, and give each other the feedback together, rather than needing management to say, okay, you guys work on that. It's how can we get them to self-drive those things?
Interesting. I have so many questions.
I wasn't sure if it was answering your question as I was talking it through, and I was like, no, I think it's a critical thing for us.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So a couple of thoughts, and answer whichever one you want. So there was a thought about so if you want that, what initiatives are you going to put in place to give people the skills to do it? Either augmenting them sounds like they're plugging them into a computer, like getting them to go away and understand the landscape of something simple as APIs and like what you can do with Gen AI, or are you going to recruit that in? But then another thing you said was how do we solve it this week? Yeah, and those two, how do you those longer fixes aren't generated if you're asking people to solve things next week.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So actually,
for sure.
So is it solve it next week or solve it long term? Because you can get two very different tangents on where the team might end up if you've got a year of solve everything by next week, like, or actually we're going to go slow, but we're going to automate.
Yeah.
Like, we're going to automate the eyeballs out of everything. Look, you could end up in two very different places this time if we were to have this conversation this time next year.
Yeah, so I think it's a combination of both, and it's therefore how do you find the balance of that. And so, there's things that happen probably in all organizations of, there's a I don't know, there's a very small technical issue that when you place an order on a system from a customer, or you do something, there's always a consistent bug, or you don't have an easy way to do newsletters. And it's like, rather than waiting for the ultimate solution, let's do something today that gets us a step forward, but let's not lose sight of how do we actually make that more scalable longer term, and kind of tackle the two. And so it's like, okay, the problem is this. Okay, what can we do today to get us moving one step forward? What can we do next week again to keep reiterating that? In the meantime, and if a business has got the teams to do that, sort of the front end team and then a back end team to do those things, it's like, okay, what can the back end team then do to make that more fundamental, or make it more automated, or a kind of bigger solve, rather than just a quick fix and a quick patch. And so it's how do you juggle those two balances of things. And so we have an amazing lady in the business now that's responsible for all of the development on our CRM and our ERP software. And so her role is all about automating everything, but it's also making sure that the team are not relying on her to do those things. It's say, okay, but what could you do today to just help solve that and move a step forward? But then give her the feedback on, hey, I've just implemented this fix, but it'd be great if actually that fix wasn't needed and we had this thing in the background to do that. It's the juggle of those two worlds that I think is going to be the hard balance for next year, but a critical balance for sure, and probably for most businesses, of not just waiting for the ultimate solution of doing something, but keeping that ultimate solution moving as well.
Nice. I love it. I'm looking forward to our conversation next year already.
Yeah, it's going to go one way or the other.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, some quick fire questions, and then we're done.
Yep.
You're dealing with a difficult conversation. What's your go-to approach?
Listening. Just listen. It's that coaching part. It's that vital model of just listening, understanding, and then just being honest and open. And so, if that difficult conversation is giving someone some feedback they're not going to like, it's giving it to them, just telling it as it is, and then pausing and letting them have a time to react and think and process that and ask questions, and then just listening. That's the critical part of just constantly listening to them.
Nice. Okay, you're facing a tight deadline. How do you get it done?
The Tesla world is just work more hours, but that's not the best way to do it. That's a hard one, because it's a focus and a drive, and it's getting people on board and galvanizing that part of, how do you get the team to then come along and then all work together. And so the ops team at ClearView are an incredible bunch of people that if they can see one team or one sort of the sub teams is falling behind, they'll all just jump in and say, okay, what do you need? How do we fix this together? Rather than just letting that sub team, finance drown in their whatever process. It's like, okay, how do we all jump in to help you solve that, and then learn from it to stop it happening again by implementing one of those fixes. So it's that rallying together in communication, say, hey, there's a problem here. Let's work on it together and spread that work quickly to get it done in time.
Nice. Okay. You've achieved a major milestone. How do you celebrate with the team?
Instantly, with like a thank you, recognition of that, of saying thank you for the hard work. And then there's different ways, whether that's we have a point system, so you can give people points, or praise in public for sure is a way to do it. And then for really big things, it's like, how do you get the team to do something social? It's harder for remote teams. But for me, the thank you is the biggest piece in that for sure. Is just and sharing that publicly so that the rest of the organization knows these people have done an amazing job and have achieved X, Y, Z.
Nice. What book should I read next?
Oh, that's a really good question. So a book that I'm sort of reading at the moment. This is embarrassing. I've forgotten the title. It's all about AI, how children's minds have been affected by technology, and the lack of sort of personal interaction with the outside world, because technologies or the world is that. Here we go. The Anxious Generation, by Jonathan Haidt, I guess you say that. Yeah, it's all about how this great rewiring of childhood, of where technologies have taken over and less social interactions has now caused an anxious generation. Yeah, that for me has been an interesting read, especially because I have a daughter, but even people that don't have children, I think it's an interesting view on society and how that affects people.
Nice. Okay. And I'm going to read the follow-up to that, rewilding. So,
Yep.
yeah. So I'm going to, cool. Last two questions. Last question. What's your go-to habit to make sure you get home on time or shut that laptop when you should?
Ooh. I say my wife. That's the first thing that came to mind. Is she'll message me and say, "Are you on your way home?" That was the first thing that came to mind. It's leaving it in my bag, and so when I come back from the office or sat at home, it's just leaving it where it is. And so when it gets to that end of day, it's just not getting it back out of my bag. That's my phone included. Just leave it in the bag so that then I go off to spend time with my daughter, my wife. And therefore the phone and the laptop are away. That's the one piece of the physical blockage of not having it with me makes a big difference to me.
Nice. Final question. Any words of wisdom for any aspiring ops leaders out there?
I think for me, it's understand the value that ops has in any organization, and that it's not just an admin function, and fight for that seat at the table to be a strategic partner to all of the departments within the business, and focus then on how as an organization you can optimize those operations across all the departments to help a company achieve its success, rather than it being just a team that just gets stuff done.
Nice. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing your story. I really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks for your time. It's been great.
It's been awesome. For people that have made it this far, if you want more of this, you can come to my YouTube channel and you can find more recordings like this. And I have a newsletter. So if you want regular productivity prods, you can sign up to that and it will be in your inbox at least twice a month, if not a couple of times more, if I've got things I feel that you might be useful in your world. Thank you very much for watching. I will leave you all to it.